And as you progress through the years, you can see just how far interest is outpacing your contributions. This is the visual representation of how money is working for you.
So, I heard you want to save some money. Or maybe you even have some debts to settle. If the camera would settle.
Sorry you had to see that, but I did make a little way to model how your investments grow or your debts settle, and hopefully this is useful for you to be able to frame your financial goals. Some of these goals you might have or questions you might want to answer are things like, how much should I be saving each month? Or is this enough to have a down payment for a house at the end of a year, 2 or 3 years? Or how long would it take for me to pay down this loan? And believe it or not, it's another Excel spreadsheet. I'm sorry, it's all Excel. Before we begin, I want you to say this affirmation with me.
To best achieve my goals, I must work with known variables, and if there are none known, I must learn.
The most important meal of the day, serving it up Gary's way. A very significant portion of modeling in the personal finance world is really just some derivation of compound interest. Because in capitalism, number go up. A totally sustainable model.
Oh, we are so fucked.
Compound interest is just a set percentage of a base amount, or a principal, tacked on every set period of time. The reason it's compound interest is that as interest gets tacked on, that gets added to the base amount for each period. So as your base grows, the interest that gets accumulated grows because it's a set percentage. So what I've got on the iPad here is what the interest will look like being added in a single set period of time. So you have your V1 here being equivalent to the V0, V0 being what your base value is at the first, times 1 plus your interest rate. Your interest being like, if it's 4%, that would end up being multiplied by 1.04, something like that. So how we get compound interest out of this is true going from period 1 to period 2. So if I have a V2 kind of being the same setup, but I can do what's called a substitution, where I can take my V1s, and since they're equal to each other, I can add in this segment and throw it in this equation instead of V1. So what I have is V2 equals V0 times 1 plus I. That is the portion we brought down from the first equation. And then it's also multiplied by 1 plus I. And that is just coming from here. Now you'll notice that these are similar terms here, so we can bring them together. And we can simplify it as V2 equals V0 times 1 plus I squared. So what you'll notice, if you keep doing this for periods and periods and periods, that these two numbers will always be equivalent to each other. So we can create what's called the fundamental equation for compound interest, and that is your future value, F, is equivalent to P, which is your present value or your principal, times 1 plus I to the nth power. And that nth power is how many periods you have. So if this goes on for 4 years, you would apply interest 4 times. And you would take that term and you would bring it to the 4th. This is the fundamental equation for so many financial models. If you're patient enough with the math, you can do this for just about anything and any kind of way that you add money to the principal over time. However, other people already did that math for us, so we're not going to do that. The base equation in that derived form only works if you have a single cash flow. That is, if you have just a lump sum of money to start with at the one time. But we are going to talk about what's called an equal payment series. An equal payment series is just what it sounds like. You have a fixed amount of payments every set period, and interest just kind of accrues in the background. This model is the basis for modeling loan payments or predicting your retirement age.
74!
My voice is not getting there today. The cool thing about this mathematically is that compound interest works both ways. In savings, the interest starts off low and builds as you continue to contribute. Hence, numbers go up, but it does take a long time. For debt, it's the reverse. Interest is pretty severe for the first couple of months or even years. That's why it kind of looks like you don't even really make a dent in your loans. And this is how we have people that make continued payments for years and years and years towards their student loans, but they have the same balance after 10 or so years. The TLDR is that interest has a lot of friction up front. It can be very discouraging to start for the first couple of months or even years. But as long as you stay consistent and have some time on your side, a lot of things are possible. Now, with that being said, let's work on some goal setting. So now that you have a crash course on everything finance, we can take a look at how these funny numbers can actually work for us, and we'll see how we can make some goals for ourselves. If you don't really know where to start for things like financial goals, there are plenty of resources for figuring out how to really settle things. There are things like the Money Guy's Financial Order of Operations or r/personal finances Prime Directive. It's all very similar, so here is my internalized version, or, what works for me. The first thing that you usually want to get out of the way is knocking down your high interest debt. This is probably a credit card or a car loan you got at 19. Anything that's over 10 to 12% interest. You have credit cards that can get up to 24, 26, even 30% APR. So you really want to get that out of the way, because that's going to hurt any chance of you trying to build up anything else. The second thing is building up an emergency fund. This is kind of modeled as an I lost my job and I need some time fund, because the usual suggestion is to build up 3 to 6 months of your expenses for emergencies. And this is very real because one of my coworkers actually got fired. So you can also include things like deductibles on your insurance policies or other expenses you want covered, but realistically, this is usually going to be in the ballpark of like a couple $1,000s, or if you have like a really volatile job and you want to save up like a year's worth of your expenses, I guess that also works too. And fun fact, did you know that almost half of Americans would struggle to afford a $1,000 emergency? So if you're doing better than that, you're doing pretty good. So don't be too hard on yourself if you find out that 6 months of your expenses is way more money than you can even imagine. We're taking baby steps here. Number 3 on my list is more of a personal choice, and that is saving for short-term goals. That's anything from a down payment on a house, or maybe you really want to look at getting a new car in the next couple of years just to have a more reliable form of transportation. The reason I put this so short on my list is I want to use the time on my side to be able to make life decisions as quickly as they come up for me. If I want to buy a house or start a family or make one of those decisions like that, and that requires an exorbitant amount of money, I don't want to put my life on hold for multiple years just so I can get there. I want to be able to make those decisions and not have to think twice about it. Number 4 on my internalized list is going to be retirement. That's going to be your 401k or Roth IRA. Those are your 2 main tax benefit accounts for retirement, and maybe some additional savings if you want to have that. Next on the list is any other tax advantage accounts like an HSA or a 529 plan, something that you want to have later in life or have something for your family later on. And number 6 on my list is taking care of other debt that has a smaller interest rate. Like, for example, my student loans have a relatively low interest rate. I think I have an average of 6%. Also, other debt might include the mortgage on your house, because if it's such a low interest rate, you'll theoretically have more returns in something like retirement investment or some other kind of thing. So that's usually kind of a lower priority. But if you're someone who wants more peace of mind in being debt-free, you can put that a little higher on your list. The honorable mention is the loan shark that you borrowed from in another city and lost the principal gambling. But that's fine because they're not going to find you. Do you guys think a deadbolt is enough to secure my front door? I find it so funny that someone wrote the bar, like Excel sheets, spread fear around here. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So in Excel, there are a few fun little functions that model financial equations. These functions are future value, present value, payment, and number of periods. We can put in different parameters like interest rates, payments, present values, time frames, and anything like that to see what kind of questions we can answer. So I've built a little spreadsheet where we can do this automatically. All we need to do is specify the account type, the question we want to answer, and a few other parameters, and we can get that on the way. So let's run through some of these numbers. So let's say I have a credit card. I can count that as debt, and I've got, say, $5,000 on it, and I get 24% APR. That's kind of typical, and I wanted to know how long it would take for me to pay it off. So we're going to have the how long until my goal question. The goal balance is going to be $0, and let's say we can throw $300 a month at it. That'll get us to a time to goal of a little over a year and a half. If I were to bump that up to just $500 a month, now I'm down to under a year. So another thing we can calculate is what our payment would be on a loan. So let's say I want to take out a loan to buy a car. So I'm going to select debt, and I'm going to borrow $10,000 probably. And I'll get somewhere in the ballpark of 10% interest, and I want to know my payment to reach the goal. The goal balance is going to be 0. And for most car loans, it's usually recommended about 4 to 7 years for your loan. So I'm going to say 5 years. That's going to be 60 months. And my payment's going to be $212. We can also try a $200,000 mortgage at 6% APR, and we're going to have that over the course of 30 years, and our payment's going to be just under $1,200. Now, that payment does look pretty nice, but that doesn't account for the other costs of homeownership, and for that, you can watch my rent versus buy video where I've built a spreadsheet to go over just that kind of thing. Let's try a savings goal. Say I have about $2,000 in a high yield savings account, and that earns me 3.8%. Oops. And I wanted to know how long it takes for me to get to $10,000. If I threw $400 a month in there, it'll take me just about 19 months. Now, if I started from 0, that would take me about 2 years. If I bumped this up to 500, that gets me right back down to 19 months. Pretty cool. All right, let's try an investment account. If I have a brokerage or a Roth IRA, and for a span of 30 years, I throw in just $100 each month and I earn 10% on that, I would end up with just over $200,000. That's pretty cool, and that's compound interest in how it works for you. But is there a better way to visualize that? And there is, because there's another part to the spreadsheet. In this spreadsheet, I've also built a separate chart that shows you the difference between contributions and interest earned and how that interacts with each other inside of an account. In this sheet, I've also added a tab that shows you the interaction between your contributions and the interest you actually earn, or the interest that gets tacked on to a loan account. In the case of a loan, this is shown as an amortization table, where you will essentially see, as you pay off and make payments towards your loan, how much of that payment is just paying down the interest and how much of that is going towards the actual balance and how much is it like making a dent. And if you go and see a couple amortization tables online, you can see just how that friction adds up. And in this way, we can take a look and see how this is for any kind of account. So let's go back to our brokerage account example and say I throw in $200 a month for the next 30 years. I'll have a future balance of just over $400,000. But from this table, you can see that while your payment towards the principal is going to stay the same, as that balance grows and grows and grows, the interest that gets added slowly becomes more and more. And there becomes a point where the interest actually outpaces your contributions. That looks just over 7 years. At month 85, you earn $201 in interest. That is pretty cool. So this point is important, and it's why you see a lot of financial advisors talking about, this is why your net worth explodes after $10,000, or the sequel, this is why everything changes after you have $20,000. And I do love Humphrey Inc.'s content, but like that was kind of annoying to see. Because mathematically, it's just an exponential function. It's just a bunch of percentages multiplied on top of each other. But the fact is, humans cannot actually comprehend numbers the way that we think we do. So to fix that, I made a couple charts for the spreadsheet too. It's a little wacky because I wanted to auto-size the horizontal axis and it just didn't work, but we'll have to work with it. It's a stacked area chart for any of my Excel nerds out there. It was just really difficult to automate for this sheet. But sticking with the same example here, if we take a look at the payment distribution chart, this is showing us how much of our growth is coming from the principal and how much of this is coming from the interest. So you can see for the entire time we're putting in $200. That doesn't stop, nothing really changes. But as this happens, our interest is growing quite a bit. So much that at the end of 30 years, we're earning $4,000 a month. And for a lot of people, that's a good amount to retire on. The cumulative payments distribution is showing how much of your account balance is attributed to either the payments or the interest. So through the years, you can see that there's just a linear growth of your payments because you put in the same amount of money month after month after month. And as you progress through the years, you can see just how far interest is outpacing your contributions. This is the visual representation of how money is working for you. While Warren Buffett is rich because he got lucky on a lot of things, he also did this because he's just fucking old. He has years on us, literally. What does he do with that money? Not really sure, but I do know that he certainly doesn't pay for a website designer on the Berkshire Hathaway website. This is so ridiculous. I guess if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't really understand why there's a Geico ad, but whatever. Unfortunately, debt earns interest the same exact way. So let's see how that adds up. Okay, so let's take a $320,000 mortgage at 6% APR. So that'll buy you a $400,000 house if you use a 20% down payment. Even though this is a standard mortgage, you can see that the vast majority of your first couple of payments are going directly towards paying down the interest. So you can see, like, for the first couple of years, you're not really making much of a dent in your loan at all. And by the end of you actually paying off this $320,000 loan, at the end of 30 years, you'll actually end up paying almost $700,000. That's a lot of damage. Now we can look at a 50-year loan for no reason at all. So over the course of 50 years, we can see that our mortgage payment is just over $200 cheaper. I know this is like a completely original example. Whatever. And at the end of your 50-year loan term, you will end up paying over $1 million. Great. Just great. You will owe nothing and be happy. Like, what? This is so fucked. So while you can see that the payments contribute more and more to the principal over time, the interest still ends up costing you a lot. So what's the lesson here? The friction is going to be in front and the rewards can be on the back end, and not for a long ass time. For a lot of investment returns, this is going to be on the scale of years and even decades. So while you can, and while you still have time on your side, try to get ahead. Try to save a little extra each month. Try to put a little more down towards your loan. Save yourself the extra trouble because you don't want to be on the wrong end of interest. And that is how finance fucking crushes so many people. With that in mind, where do you really find that exploding point where your interest is earning the same amount as your contribution? Or maybe your interest is just earning enough for you to not have to work so hard, or maybe for you to even retire? I'm excited to tell you that there is bonus math for the end of this video. So to figure out the desired balance point where your interest earned is equivalent to your desired payment, we can set up the equation for earned interest. So the interest you earn over any one period is going to be equivalent to your balance times your interest rate. A quick note that I haven't mentioned is that if you do make annual returns, but you're compounding your things monthly, your active interest rate is actually going to be divided by 12. For credit payments, that's kind of why APR is a thing and APY is a thing for savings accounts. So you can see your annual returns and you can have a guess of like what your annual returns are going to be, but because it's compounded every month, it's going to be a little different. So let's say I want my interest earned to be equivalent to the payment I contribute. So I'll set up payment equals balance times your interest rate. And then we can just do a little algebra. I'm going to divide both sides by my interest rate. So divide both by I, and that'll give me with the balance desired is going to be equivalent to the payment over my interest rate. Boom. So hypothetically, if I wanted to get to $400 a month, earning 4% APY, what that's going to look like is my balance is going to be 400, and my interest is going to be 4% over 12. This 4% over 12 is 0.04 over 12, which is equivalent to 0.0033 whatever the fuck. And then if I throw that into my trusty dusty calculator, my desired balance is then going to be 120,000 buckaroos. That is quite a lot. And if we head back to my little Excel spreadsheet, if I were to put $400 a month towards this balance at this interest rate, trying to earn $120,000, it will take me 208 months, which is about 17 years. All of this to earn $400 a month in interest. That's passive income, baby! Woo! And this is why hustle culture sucks. Here on this channel, we stay consistent and we stay patient, and good things will come our way. Thank you everyone for staying on and watching till the end. As usual, I'm going to link these sheets in some kind of Google Drive. I'll have the Excel template, and then I'll also make sure that there's a Google-friendly version for you to use if you don't have access to Excel or you just want it to be a little easier for you. If you have any questions, comments, or mockery, please let me know down below. And if you enjoyed the video, please like it. And if you want to see more of this, please let me know, and also subscribe to the channel, and you know the whole deal. Anywho, cheers.